Yeah, hi. This webinar is hosted by Oregon Farmers Markets Association, or OFMA, OFMA. We support farmers markets with training, networking, advocacy, funding, and promotion. My name is Amanda Cross. I'm the programs manager here at OFMA. Also here is Kendra Graves, OFMA's communications and membership manager. You'll see her running today's chat window, and also regularly in your inbox and OFMA's digital media. If you're not getting an e-newsletter from us every couple of weeks, let us know and we'll add you to the list. They have all of our updates, job announcements, and resources for anyone working at a farmer's market. You can also check out our events schedule online and see what's coming next. We'll hope you'll register and join us again. Plus, we have recordings of all our past workshops in our YouTube library. There's lots of opportunities through OFMA to connect and find support from Oregon's statewide farmers market community. So thanks. I'm happy to see this crowd gathering here. We already have started with introductions. Thank you for popping in the chat and saying hello. Before we dive in, again, I want to just set a few expectations for our time together. First, cameras are totally up to you, on or off, whatever helps you feel comfortable and engaged. And there's lots of ways to be a part of a group here. Your engagement, however you choose to show it, makes the workshop richer for everyone. You can share thoughts in the chat, raise your hand when we open up for questions, or use emojis and reactions to show what resonates with you. Being part of this group also means respecting others. Please give our panelists and fellow participants time to respond and space to ask their questions too. So our agenda today is set up in a couple parts. We're going to start with some connection time and a chance to meet who's here today. Then we'll move into the Q&A with our panel guests. Today we have on hand Amber Orion from Rural Organizing Project and Hood River Latino Network, who you met a couple weeks ago when they presented how farmers markets can plan effective resistance if ICE comes to your market. And also here's Michael Jonas, owner and attorney for Narwhal Law and Business Strategy, who assisted OFMA with a legal guide for markets that's available in OFMA's resource library. They'll get to introduce themselves more when we start the Q&A, but before we get to Q&A, we're gonna take about 15 minutes for meeting each other. We'll start with a series of short and sweet breakout rooms where you'll be paired one-on-one. If we were all in a room together in person, I'd say turn to your neighbor, but instead Kendra's gonna put you in a breakout room with your virtual neighbor. Once you're there, you'll have 3 minutes to find out what made your partner say yes to being here today. After those few minutes, we'll bring everyone back to the main room, and then we'll do it again, and with someone new. And then we'll do one more round. So we're going to do this 3 times. So remember, when you get into a room, just jump right in. These 3 minutes go by pretty quickly. Find out what made your partner say yes to being here. But if you have some extra time, feel free to share what help you need with your response plan. So I think we're ready. Kendra, do you want to start the breakout rooms? And let us know where to find them if they're not popping up on people's screens. I don't think we're seeing anything yet. Kendra, can you let us know what's happening?
Yes, thanks for your patience. What's happening is that there are quite a few people here, and so I was just assigning people to the rooms. You'll see a pop-up soon to
Okay,
indicate that the rooms are opening, and please join when you
great.
see the pop-up. If you have an issue joining a room, please let me know.
Oh,
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
back.
Everybody's almost here. Great. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the chance to learn who's here and why they came. Curious if you noticed if your own answers changed over time. Maybe you learned something about your own motivations as well. Okay, we're going to move into our session with Amber and Michael and our Q&A. So Amber, Michael, would you like to say a quick hello first? Then we'll start taking questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. We'll call on you or we'll voice your question from the chat. Amber, do you want to go first saying hello?
Hello. Good morning to everybody. My name is Amber. I work with the Hood River Latino Network and Rural Organizing Project. And I work in, among other things, a lot in immigrant justice. So I'm really excited to be here and so excited to see so many people interested in talking about this and learning more.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Jonas. I'm a community business attorney, so I help nonprofits, small businesses, and creatives of all types. Some of you may know me. I used to own Rational Unicorn Legal Services. I sold it about a year and a half ago, and this is my newest venture, which is Narwhal Law and Business Strategy. So it's law plus business consulting. But yeah, happy to be here. I worry about the time we're in, but I think this is the best thing we can do is to learn and prepare.
Thanks. Hi there. So who has a question? Who's been working on their plans? Something you want to ask Amber or Michael or any of the other farmers markets here and what they're doing? Hi, Matthew.
So someone's got to be that person, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks so much for putting this on. And the question I had for you is, so I work across the state. We work with a number of different farmers markets. Lincoln, Illinois here is like double up bucks there, if you're familiar with that program. So we're a snap matching program. Anyway, so we talk to a lot of different farmers markets and certainly get feedback from them and all the really good questions and the really random ones too. But one of the things that have come in recently, and I was just curious if you've seen it, if there's any thoughts on it, or it could also be, hey, that person probably has the story wrong, which would be totally okay as well. But they were mentioning that they had put together a plan where at the place where they're at, they have some businesses that are nearby, and so they put together a plan that if communication happened, this was raids are happening near the area or the ISIS around the area, that they were going to direct some of the people to go to a certain business. And we've heard that the business then got in some legal troubles because they were pretty openly, like even a sign in the window, like hide here sort of thing. And while my gut tells me maybe just the overt nature of that particular maybe wasn't the best plan, is there anything, without getting into legal advice here, obviously, but is there truth to that? Are there some precautions that people need to think about if they are trying to be a safe space where maybe the a farmer's market doesn't have that opportunity, but a business might? That any pros, cons, or best practice tips? Maybe even just don't put a sign in your window, which is in my head. Maybe I think they were just too overt about it, would be my guess, but would love your thoughts if you have any. Thanks so much.
I can talk first if that's okay. I actually just had a similar conversation with someone in the breakout session. So the issue we have is that even though Oregon and Portland and some other cities in Oregon are we're a sanctuary state. We also have sanctuary cities. If you interfere with ICE, because ICE is federal, those are potential federal crimes. And so some of the involvement that ICE has had relating to the businesses that have tried to safe harbor, they weren't able to argue that their city, county, or state could protect them because those were federal charges. We live in this really interesting time or contrast where we want folks to know that they're safe, whether it's immigrants, trans folks, women, whomever. But we're also now in this sort of, as you do that and let folks know you're safe, you're also opening up to target. So I don't have my opinion on this is yes, we need to make safe spaces. We absolutely need to do it. But you sort of have to balance the openness and the communication of it, because the worry is that you could potentially have federal charges. So I'm not telling people don't do this. I'm saying sort of balance those things, or and I don't have the answers. We have to think how creatively to let folks know that they're safe without giving the impression that we're interfering with federal ICE enforcement.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to back that up with on the tail end of what Michael was saying, the community piece of, in these moments, our liberation is tied to one another. So one of the best things that we can do is talk to our neighbors, talk to the folks around us, our friends, and let people know by word of mouth, because it really is one of the safer ways to connect with folks these days. So continue building in your community. But like Michael said, there are a lot of things that can put folks at risk. So being a little bit more creative really is the way we can stay connected to one another right now.
If or when you do harbor someone, make sure you put them in what would be considered a private area, in the sense that, if it's a food cart pod, or we don't want it to be in a place where they could argue that it potentially is a public area.
Mhm.
So there's that. And then there's also ask for a warrant, and there's administrative warrants. There's also judicial warrants. It has to be a specifically approved warrant for that person. So you have the right, if someone's trying to get at a person who you're safe harboring, to one, not answer questions, but tell them that this is a private area. You don't even have to mention the person that might be there. You could say, this is a private area. Do you have a warrant? Otherwise, I don't consent to entry. Have a nice day.
Yeah. And just to explain a little bit more on the two different kinds of warrants that Michael was talking about, I don't have an example with me currently. But if you look up the difference between what an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant look like, the reason those are different is because a judicial warrant is an actual, essentially, arrest warrant signed by a judge. An administrative warrant is somebody at ICE who essentially puts warrant on the top of the paper and then signs it themselves, but they have two different legal consequences. So keeping an eye on which type of warrant it is had. And thus far, although not never, but rarely do we actually see judicial warrants. They do exist for this, but we rarely actually see judicial warrants in situations. So always ask, and know that you will likely see it on a phone versus paper most times.
Thank you both very much for the answer, and thanks for the organizers for opening this up to some of us from a little further afield too. So hello from Illinois. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Megan. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's pretty on topic too. So for my specific market, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I probably should start by saying that I don't know if like rules are different depending on where you are, but currently we set up in the parking lot of what used to be a church. Now it is a privately owned business. So it technically, if we are like open to the community and everyone is welcome to come to our market, and we definitely emphasize that. But at the same time, we are on private property, and we would, I believe, I haven't talked to her, but we would have the support of the landlord to say things like, hey, immigrants are welcome here, ICE is not. Um, so I don't, but next year we actually are moving back to the public park location that we once were in. So I'm kind of wondering about the different rules or different laws or whatever, in terms of we're in a privately owned space now versus being in a public park. And when we're talking about, if we are going to help someone get to a safe space that is not a public space, just wondering about the differences in those public versus private spaces.
That's a great question.
Do you want me to speak to that, or do you want? This is really difficult because farmers markets are often hybrid situations, or it's a private market on a public space. Public, everything can be private about it. The In terms of ICE and in terms of enforcement of immigration, they are looking at what's open to the general public. So even if it's considered a private space or private market, if there's shoppers who are coming from the outside in and there's shoppers from the public invited, they'll deem it as a public space in terms of immigration enforcement. I put this on the sheet that I made, and I think marking places private areas is good. If ICE enters, you could potentially, I don't know how the church is set up, like if there's a door, like you go in one door and then you're then in the other space. You could sort of try to build up or out public and private spaces, and then you're balancing the welcoming component of that. You don't want to make it a barricade situation. So my main point or takeaway is, even if you are in a building that's owned by a private company or landlord, or even if it is a small, somewhat private market, if you have outside people from the public coming in and shopping, it's considered public for immigration enforcement, unfortunately.
Yeah. We do have, I wanted to note the public-private spaces piece. I know that we've talked about this a little bit, and I'd really be interested in, if you'd like to, talking after this, because you live in Ohio, is that correct?
She's nodding yes.
Okay. And so it'd be interesting to see what locally the laws are, just because it is going to be different from here in Oregon. But creating those private spaces, including like the back of booths, as long as there's, a barrier and a sign, you can sometimes. And I say sometimes because what we're seeing with ICE is these are the laws and these are the ways that they act, and they're not always in accordance, right? ICE officers are going against what our laws say often. So what I would say is create those barriers, and there are signs. Whether they will listen to them or not is one of the issues, but there are legal, and I'm sure Michael can speak to this, but we were just talking about this last night with um, a group of lawyers, that there's a lot that's being done in the courts to undo the things that ICE are doing. It's not a for sure, but it definitely can help. So having signs up and being specific about your space sometimes can help, even if something does happen in the long run. So I encourage people to continue to do those things, even if they're not working the way that we would like them to, because there still may be recourse legally.
There was a question in the chat about vehicles. I just wanted to add to that all of this is so nuanced, and your famous lawyer answer is always, it depends. Like one fact can change things. And then also I want to acknowledge we're living in a time where people aren't following the rules who are doing these things. So, which is also scary. We learn the thing or the rule and then we figure out that they're not following it. So generally, in terms of vehicles, ICE is allowed to approach and they're allowed to ask questions. That's fine. They cannot open or enter the vehicle unless they have consent or a judicial warrant. Does that make sense? If there is, this is getting nuanced, someone's driving and they're pulled over for reasonable suspicion, such as like and people do this all the time. They use it as a pretext to stop. So like, you know, your headlights out, and then they actually know that this is someone who is an immigrant, or this is someone who they want to follow, whatever it may be. So that's a whole other issue. But in terms of if you're in a parked car, you have a Fourth Amendment right against search and seizure. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy, both you and whomever is in the car. Can they ask you questions? Yes. Can they force you out of the vehicle or open the car? No, not unless there's consent or judicial warrant.
That's the legal
There,
answer. And I wanted to add to that what we're actually seeing, which is they do break windows and they do force people out and they do these things sometimes. So
yeah.
still, you know, knowing your rights is important because there may be later recourse, but we are unfortunately seeing much more of the broken windows and
The other
coercion. I don't know if that's the right word.
no, that's right. The other nuance to this, and sorry, I told you it's layered, is there's all kinds of exceptions for Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment gives us our reasonable expectation of privacy, but there's all these exceptions of like they believe that someone is going to flush drugs down the toilet, or they believe that someone's violent, or someone's going to flee, or so there's like a list of excuses or pretext where enforcement doesn't have to follow your reasonable expectation of privacy. So there are times where they won't follow that and they'll blame it on one of those excuses. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I would say record, 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 record. If you're going to get pulled over or if somebody approaches your vehicle, immediately record and hold horizontally if you can, because often you get much more video in a horizontal frame than you do in a vertical. But I really, really encourage people record, even if you're in public and you see something that you're not sure about, record, because if it's not something that you needed to record, then you delete it afterwards and you're not out anything at all.
Our resource folder of resources about ICE include a bunch of videos that Amber shared with us that show what it's like when ICE comes and also what it's like to film these things. So please check out our folder for more information. Amber, I was wondering if you could also share, you were mentioning in our earlier session that ICE comes often when people are on their way somewhere. Like it might not, your vendor or your community, it might not happen at the market. Where else could this happen? And I encourage markets to think about like, how are you supporting your vendors and community members if this happens to them somewhere that is outside of the market?
Mhm. So I'm going to speak on behalf of Oregon at the moment, just because there are some different laws here than there are in other places. I'm happy to talk about other places as well. Um, but uh, sorry, I have a kitty here and it just distracted me for a second. Um, often we see folks being okay. So ICE unfortunately often will hunt people. So they watch what they're doing for days or weeks beforehand to find out what their routines are. This is something we see all the time. This is a common practice by ICE. And so what happens is often we will see folks being picked up between um, leaving home and getting to work, or from work to home. Same thing with farmers markets, and they look at their routines. And the reason that they do that is because ICE are cowards. They don't like a crowd. If they go to pick up one person that is along a route, they might have one or two people because they know what they're doing and the person may not know that they're coming. And so they have that, I guess, advantage. If they know that it's going to be a busier place, they're likely to bring 4 to 6 people or more. And that also means there's a lot more planning involved because they know that there's pushback from community because they know what they're doing is wrong. That's an opinion, but it's pretty clear. Um, so because of that, we encourage people to be very aware of what's going on around them when they are in their cars. And when they are coming and going, you know, even getting out of your car, going into a school or a building or a market, those are places that they will often try to grab people because they can usually get them more isolated, and it's very quick. ICE is very quick. They come in, they grab somebody, and they leave. They do not want any kickback. So the other thing I wanted to say is, if you do see something that's happening, let's say you're driving and you see a weird situation where you see a couple of folks talking to somebody and you're not sure, if it feels like safe for you to do so, pull over or walk up and just, can I help? Is there something wrong? Do you need me to call somebody? Because the worst that's going to happen is you're going to look like a nosy neighbor. But if you do pull over and it is in fact ICE harassing somebody, you stopping can make the difference between them getting picked up or not picked up. It also can make the difference between, bringing a crowd, getting recording. Sometimes we don't find about people being picked up until a day or two later because they got picked up when nobody was around. And so there were no witnesses. And so we don't even know what happened. And so it's really important that we get these recordings and we get connected with people. So I really, really encourage people to step out of our comfort zones, especially since COVID. We've been a lot more isolated, and just talk to people. What's going on? How are you doing? And connect, like Amanda said, with your vendors about you know, um, we don't have to ask people directly if they're at risk, right? Because that's a private thing and people will share with us if they feel safe with us to share those things. But just give people all the same information. Hey, if you're concerned about yourself or somebody else, here's some information. Make sure this paperwork is in order. Here's some rights information. This is what we should do. And this is how we're protecting you at the market. Please give us a call if anything comes up, if that feels comfortable. Everybody has different roles in market. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple important questions that are coming up in the chat, and I want to get to those right away. But I think eventually I would like to circle around to let's think about what this could be like at the market and how a market manager would be having to talk or interact with ICE, because that will be a very stressful situation for all of you when that happens. So it'd be great to talk through that. But there's a couple important questions in the chat. One is, as a farmer's market manager, am I obligated to ask my vendor about their legal status?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. Actually, I would encourage folks not to do so.
No,
But Michael,
no.
if you have other, okay.
You're not obligated to do that. If they're an employee of the market somehow, we have the I-9 citizenship verification, the one that's like list column A, column B. But other than that, no, you don't have to ask any vendors about their legal status. And I agree with Amber. I would recommend that you don't do that.
Yeah, we ask folks to treat it like when you're dealing with queer folks, we don't ask people and we don't out people. People share with us when they feel comfortable and if they feel comfortable.
Thank you. And also, where we have some links to copies of the Clear and Clara cards in our folder, but where else can people get those, and should they print them themselves or?
So yeah, you can check out Oregon for All is one place that has incredible resources for Oregon wide. I'd love to connect with folks who are out of state that are looking for similar type resources. I'm happy to see if we can get you connected to some of those if you're not already. But Oregon for All is one of the best places to go for immigration information. Also PIRC, which is Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition, which, although it is centered in Portland, it is statewide, and they actually hold the hotline, which I'd love for everybody, if you have a moment, to put this, if you are in Oregon, put this number in your phone, because this is the number. If you see any ICE activity, this is the statewide hotline to call and report that to. So that number is 1-888-622-1510. And I think we can probably put that in the chat. And I encourage you to check out Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition online, check out Oregon for All online. There are plenty of resources. There's also the, Law Center, Immigrant Law Center. I'm blanking on the name, but I'll.
Talking about IRCO? Immigrant Rights.
Innovation law. People are putting their links.
You must talk about IRCO or or yeah, perk is also related to that.
We do have, Amber shared with us a whole list of other organizations to check out, as did Michael, and those are both in our folder also. We have links to all of those things that were mentioned before.
Yeah. Oh, immigrant NERP, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. That was what I was trying to think of. That's the other one. Yes, yes. But go ahead and check those out there. You can print them out yourselves. There's the what we've been doing is printing out clara cards, one on each side, so that way it's bilingual. There are other languages as well if your area uses other languages more frequently. And then there's also information we print out with front, back, and then do a second card, which has the Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition, that hotline number on there, and ECHO, which is the Equity Corps of Oregon, which has to do with the legal representation that we connect to folks if they are picked up. They also do other work, but that is an integral part. And then the Know Your Rights is on the other side. So having just those two cards with all of that information can be really helpful. And you can definitely print them out yourselves, no problem.
I'm curious if people have questions about how an interaction with ICE will go, knowing that you as the market manager will maybe the person who's having to do it. Sharon has a Sharon, do you want to ask a question first?
Yeah, I mean, this is totally related to that, what you're talking about, and basically just any resources that folks have about trainings for being a spokesperson. I think just, for sure market managers, but just being within our communities in the grocery store parking lot or wherever activities might be happening. Just I know that I'm one of those that gets really nervous, but I want to be prepared so that I can stand up, so that I can kind of delay, defer, question, support, notify, all the things that need to be done. And so yeah, I would love to have information about that.
I just added it to the chat. We actually, as a firm, just had a Know Your Rights training. The Oregon Justice Resource Center, which also houses the Innocence Project, they do really great work, and they've been doing trainings all across the state. And then also they have resources. So if you said to them, hey, this is my role, do you have information for me that I can either share, or how should I approach sharing this information? They're really helpful at that. So I would contact the Oregon Justice Resource Center.
Definitely. And also, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I can drop a link into the chat as well.
And then the other one, I'll just go back to the Oregon for All again, because they have fantastic resources for such. They, in addition to what Michael was saying, they can help folks work through that. And I'm also happy to meet, if there are folks around the state, I'm happy to meet and talk a little bit about what you're doing at your market and your particular circumstances, and how we can support you with resources and, kind of navigating that, at least on a general level, in the spaces that you're in, because I think it is really important. And to remember that not all roles in interrupting this ICE violence have to be aggressive. And I mean that because, right, we all operate differently. Some people are like, listen, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to say a thing, we're going to have words. And other people will go up, and I've heard people say, like, I'm older, and so I can play a role of like an abuelita, or like, I can do a thing that is disarming or distracting. It doesn't always have to be like coming up against somebody in that way. You could walk up and be like, guess what? I got new socks. Do you want to see? And just channel that like 7-year-old, and just say silly things, or do a little dance, or, do something to make the situation feel uncomfortable and awkward so that they want to leave. And I really, really encourage people to get creative. Show them your new tattoo. I mean, maybe you have to go to the bathroom right there. I'm not saying you should do that, but you know what I mean? Like, you could just squat down and do something unusual. Be like, something to really throw them off, because we want them to just go.
Yeah, I think Lacey's asking a question in the chat that I think ties into this. So, Lacey, do you want to just come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. It's just thinking about there's the being a citizen and interacting with ICE. I wasn't able to attend, but I watched the presentation you did, Amber, last month. Fantastic, super helpful. But being as myself, I'm a market manager, so on market day, I'm the one that holds that space. I'm the one that is responsible for maintaining a safe space. And just thinking about, like, yes, I probably would be the one to, directly interact. I wouldn't ask my volunteers, hey, would you go talk to them? But are there ways that other people can contribute other than taking video? Like, what are appropriate tasks and roles to ask other people to take on? And how, if I'm the one going and interacting, who's holding that safe space? And how do we manage that?
That's a great question. The first thing that I think of when we have these situations, like, there are two things. There's preventative and then there's in the moment. And I think both are really important. On the preventative side, having these conversations, which it sounds like a lot of folks who are here are either having or wanting to have with their folks. So talking to your vendors, talking to your volunteers ahead of time, maybe even setting up, you are in Hillsdale, I could come out to Hillsdale and we could do a group training if that's something, or a Zoom training to share some of these things as well and get people thinking about it. Um, but I think giving people tasks ahead of time, which is like, hey, here's 3 tasks that I need folks to do. We'll talk about what those actually are in a second. Here's 3 folks. And so I'd love for people to start thinking about which ones, or even assign them and be like, hey, you're going to be this role, you're going to be this role, you're going to be this role, if and when these things pop up. So that's going to help people get themselves prepared and in the right mind frame ahead of time. In the moment when something happens, sometimes it will be exactly how you know what I mean, like things will be set up and it'll be like, oh, perfect, this, and this. But I encourage people to think about, for those here who have done CPR training, how we do CPR. If somebody is on the ground and needing assistance, typically somebody will come up and interact and say, you call 911, you get the AED machine, and having those specific tasks. And I say that to say, often when we're really overwhelmed and a lot's going on, we'll do something and say, like, can somebody do blah, blah, blah. And the reality is, if we give very direct, clear instructions, the chances of people showing up and doing their pieces is much greater. So I encourage people to think of it like those CPR moments in the moment, but getting folks ready. And some of those roles look like recording. And I actually recommend, if you have multiple people, do multiple recordings, because you're going to get different angles, right? Maybe have somebody standing on each side. Having somebody there witnessing what's happening is helpful. But the first and most important parts to do in order would be have somebody interacting with ICE if possible, trying to distract them, and or be persistent, persistently ask for a warrant, ask for their name, ask what they're doing there. If you feel comfortable, you could even ask them to leave. The second role would be, somebody needs to call PERC right away, because once you call PERC, that hotline number, they can get additional legal observers out there quickly, typically quite quickly, depending on your area. And they will also then, PERC will then let your regional and local rapid response folks know, and then folks will show up. So you will get backup. So interacting, having somebody call PERC, doing the recording, and then having somebody kind of just stand back and witness, because when we're recording, we're very focused on the recording, which is important. And we should be narrating, because there will be details missed. So hold your phone horizontal, narrate what you're doing, making sure that your phone is following where you're intending to be, meaning there's a lot going on. Sometimes we get confused and things get shaky. So making sure that folks have those roles. So having somebody in an observing role that's not recording when you have enough people is really helpful, because they'll notice things that other people may not recognize, which is, there's another car over there with ICE. There's somebody else that maybe needs some other assistance. And then the last role, or another important role, would be somebody that can help other people get to safety. Some people are going to want to come in and assist when they feel like, when there's that privilege to be able to be in that space, and other people may need assistance getting away to a safe location.
Um, That was great. I added this to the chat, but I also know there's recording, so I wanted to make sure to say these things out loud. So I would start training your team and staff and volunteers, whomever is working at the market. Have them practice or prepare a script. I know that sounds silly because why would we give them a script? We're not doing voter outreach or telemarketing or whatever, but the purpose of the script is to limit the information that gets out that may not be beneficial, and also to deflect, which is what's needed in the situation. So in terms of the script, I'm not here to answer this question. You have to speak to the market manager. That's Sarah over there. So that's one thing, is guiding them to have ICE talk to one particular party or a couple particular parties. Another one is, this market's private. Do you have a judicial warrant? So getting folks to prepare to ask those questions. And then I also added a comment in here about different roles. Recording video, great, that's important. If there's a note taker, also important. Being a witness, also important. Someone calling Herc, as Amber mentioned, also important. Community reassurance, not just the person who maybe is being targeted, but also if folks who are there, you're there on a regular day with your family and you see ICE, it could potentially is a scary situation. People don't know what to do. So there's a role for community assurance for what that situation is. So I think painting a picture for your team of, okay, if ICE comes, these are the market vendors who have volunteered to be witnesses, or these are the ones who have volunteered to talk to people who may be comfortable with ICE's presence. Thinking about roles like that, I think, are really important prior to this happening.
Absolutely. And Michael, you put aftercare there on the bottom, and I wanted to just speak on that real quick. One of the things that folks can do is set up Polk County, I can't remember the name, Harvest Collective, Cultural Harvest Collective, I think it's called,
Yeah,
is doing some real, go ahead.
No, yeah, Cultural Harvest Collective, the Monmouth.
Okay. They have a really great mutual aid program set up already, where they're trying to help folks in their community who are directly affected and maybe afraid to come out, as well as doing wraparound care afterwards. And there are other people around the state. I just know that that is one connected to OFMA that is doing that work, that mutual aid work. And that aftercare, that wraparound care is really important, because when people get picked up, there are many steps to take next. As much as we want to interrupt the violence that's happening, and that is really important, there are also other steps, like when somebody's taken away, often you have other family members that are there and or need to be notified. There's other things like, we're all whole human beings with whole entire lives prior to this, this government violence. And so there, people might need something done with their cars, or legal assistance, or, just uh, mental health support, all these kinds of things. And often when we're in times of crisis, our lizard brain kicks in, and if we're not as great at doing those things. So if we as a community can wrap people up when they're in these moments, it's so powerful, and really important to making sure that our community stays as well as possible during times of crisis like these.
And part of that is making the connection. There's the aftercare, but there's the before care, and part of that is making these connections ahead of time.
Yes.
Or if you want to talk about that, or I know that there's some markets that are on this call that have already started, you have a plan in place and you've already made connections in your community. If you wanted to come on and share examples of the kind of people that you're talking to and the meetings that you're making sure are happening, it'd be great to hear those examples. Amber, if you want to go, that's great.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were waiting for markets to hop on. Examples of community care. So this goes back to oh, I was going to bring this. Okay, I'm going to send a link to you all after the fact so you can share it with all the folks here. But there's everything from the no, you're right. Sorry, sometimes I get the names mixed up. protect your family packets. So there are two different kinds of packets. There's a protect your family packet, which is for anybody who has children under 18, which I highly encourage every person who has children under 18 to fill out, because when we live in a police state, things change rapidly, and there are a lot of people at risk, even when we don't realize we're at risk. So I really encourage these packets will give you information and have you fill out legal forms to give like power of attorney. I think that's the right, basically like the custody of your minor child if something were to happen, including being able to like fly out of the country and all of these things. So I encourage people to have these done, period. Just share those with your vendors if they have kids under 18, regardless. And then the other packets are like just getting your affairs in order. So those are the technical pieces that we can do, but also talking to your vendors, getting to know people. And it doesn't have to be a like, hey, are you what is your status? It can just be like, how are you doing? How are things affecting you? This is pretty rough, just being people, having conversations, building that up with folks and having that trust. And then also talking to your neighbors in your community, not just the folks that are at your market, but wherever you're at. If you have businesses around you, neighbors, homes, whatnot, make sure that you know the whole community so that when something does happen, like the person that is in Ohio had mentioned you haven't talked to the person that owns the building yet, but you plan on. That's a great start. Talk to that person, see where they're at, make a plan with that person, make a plan with the people that are in charge, your staff. And I think it's funny because I was going to say, and really get to know them, but I feel at farmers markets, that is a place that we do get to know each other, right? So just lean into that already. And we share food already, we share space. And I think that our relationships with one another and setting these pieces up ahead of time is really the most powerful piece. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I feel like.
Yeah, and I think just markets checking in with like, who is your local police department? Have you ever talked to them before? Have you talked to your representatives that are for your district? Have you, depending on what sort of space your farmers market is on, if it's on a school, have you talked to the school security? Have you talked to the administration people there that you need to talk to?
Absolutely.
On a church, if it's on, maybe it's on a private property that you're using a bank's parking lot or something. When was the last time? And you don't have to go to them and say, hey, I want to talk to you about ICE and what happens. Like, these are all connections you should be making on lots of levels and subjects. So like just going into like, hey, I just want to give you an update about what the farmers market is doing and how our season is, and like just making sure that that connection is there so that when something does happen, it's going to feel easier to call them up because you talked to them 3 months ago and they know who you are when you're calling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh goodness. The other, Somos Inmigrantes. So there's another way if you're interested, and I know that we do this in the Columbia River Gorge, which is where I live, the Hood River Market, shout out. We have a really cool campaign. It actually originally started in Billings, Montana in the 80s, where there was a family who put a menorah up in their window to celebrate Hanukkah during the holidays, and somebody threw something through their window and threatened their family. And their town said, absolutely not in our town. So among other activities of solidarity to build community, they handed out menorahs to families throughout the community who put them in their window and lit them to say, not in our town. We are all tied together. We do belong together. And it was a really, really beautiful display of solidarity. And in the Gorge, we have a group that started the Somos Inmigrantes campaign, which is we are immigrants. Unless you are Native American, you are or descend from immigrants to this land, and to recognize how similar we really all are. And we have these big, huge, bright yellow signs with beautiful purple lettering that say Somos Inmigrantes, we are immigrants. There are lawn signs, we have window clings, buttons, car flags, all kinds of pieces to put in your places, whether it's at the market or at home, or even in your car to say, we are all immigrants. I mean, except folks who are Native Americans. And so we need to stand together. And what that's created at the farmers market is they have a booth where they talk to folks and people come up, ask questions, and they share the story. And then they give pieces of this Somos Emigrantes campaign. And it's a really cool way to start conversations that might otherwise feel awkward. So if you're interested in bringing this to your community, be happy to share that information with you and get you in touch with them, and either have somebody come out and share and help you set that up, or simply send you the files of things that you can print out or create on your own, because they have made it open source so folks can utilize that, because we want this to be anybody that wants to be in on this campaign. It does not have to be just one spot. So I encourage you all to reach out if you're interested in that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too about the before care of like broadcasting what your market stands up for and what its values are. There was a note in the chat a minute ago about volunteers writing something like no ice allowed on the sidewalk in front of your market, and like how do you, like, what if I think the question was sort of like, what if volunteers are kind of saying something different than what the market is? Well, make sure your volunteers will be on message with you if you are broadcasting your message and what you are standing up for as a market. If Amber or Michael or any of other markets that are already doing this want to speak to that a little bit more.
Oh, I just said I agree with that. Establishing, if you haven't already, separate from bylaws and separate from all your operating procedures. I've been helping a lot of organizations lately do community guideline exercise. So we actually come up with like a list of things that we agree on. This market is pro-immigrant. This market is here for safety. This market, and then the idea is that everyone that is sponsor, vendor, board, staff, any of those things has to agree to those community guidelines. And involving everyone in those guidelines is actually really helpful to getting them to agree to it, instead of just like posting the rules and being like, these are our guidelines now. So I suggest it as an activity where you're, asking volunteers like, what rules do you think we should have, or what values do you think we should outwardly express?
I really like what you're saying too, Michael, because I think that kind of a situation is so great for building trust and building community within your teams, and your volunteers, your staff, because it allows folks to bring their own thoughts, fears, and ideas into the situation, right? And being able to talk those through and be all on the same page. And people have these incredibly big, beautiful brains, and so you might have somebody that's like, hey, what about this? And you're like, oh my gosh, that's a perfect idea for our scenario. So I do definitely think that that's really important, and you get a lot more buy-in from people when you have these. And I really, really, really encourage y'all to show up imperfectly in these spaces, because one of the biggest things that we can do to build trust is to just be ourselves and be vulnerable in different ways. So it's okay if you don't know all of the things. It's okay if you don't know exactly how to do it. You can be like, hey, this is new stuff, new territory. Let's talk about this. How's everybody feeling today? And just make it really real, because it is. And, we're all people at the end of the day. So building that community and trust is so, so important for the before, during, and after. And just because, life's short, it's good to know your neighbors. Michael, you also brought up in here, which I thought was really important, the Signal app. I really highly encourage, we use it almost exclusively in immigration justice. And having the Signal app, it takes a minute it's just an encrypted text messaging app. You can also do like video phone calls with multiple people on there, which is helpful if you have like a team of 5 and you want to more safely connect with folks. But mostly it's just an encrypted text message app. And I really, really encourage folks to download it. But you have to, somebody has to have it downloaded on their phone in order for you to message them from there, if that makes sense. So you both have to have it, but definitely get
Yeah.
Signal, look into it, set it up. It's a really important tool for this time.
And Signal is similar to Slack and Discord if you've used those before, but it's the preferred app because of the encryption. It seems to be more protected or more safe. But yeah, our neighborhood uses it quite a bit, and we also have like subsections. So we have like our main general group, and then we have like a garden resource one. Like, hey, I have a bunch of tomatoes. Do you want some? We have like a political one where people want to talk about going to a march or a rally. So you can sort of also do that, like have like main market business, and then also have a section on ICE or a section on something else. And then also you can get notifications. So if notifications are on and you don't have everybody's number, but everybody's on the Signal app, you could literally send out a message that's like ICE is at our market, and then everybody's phone that has those notifications would ding or get a notification of that.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
back to markets stating their values too. Of course, everyone should be checking out Farmers Market Coalition's anti-racism toolkit. It has a whole section, the 4 M's, mission, management, messaging, and forgot the last M, but the 2 M's that are important here are mission and messaging, and looking at the examples and tell you exactly how to do it. We're getting close to the end. What questions? This is your chance. If you haven't asked a question yet, please come off mute, raise a hand, put it in the chat.
I also wanted to encourage people in your communities, if you're interested in being more involved beyond the market, or really to support the market, I would say too, is especially for folks in Oregon, and other states may also be the same if you're a sanctuary state. But if you're also a sanctuary city or county on top of being sanctuary state, I encourage you to go to your council or your commission and say, what does this mean? What does it mean that we're a sanctuary state? What does it mean that we're a sanctuary city? What does it mean that we're a sanctuary county? Because often we do things symbolically, which is great, but there are actions that can follow that up. So, one of the best ways to get buy-in from your community is start in one of those ways. Or, talk to your local tow truck company and be like, hey, if ICE double parks, will you come tow them? But just ways to connect with your community to say, what does it mean when we are a sanctuary space? And what is, as far as actions are concerned.
Also, just a quick thought back to training what your volunteers or staff. Like, I know markets have volunteers. It's different people every week, and you may feel like, oh, I gotta tell people what our ICE plan is every time. But just think of it as like all of this is useful information anywhere outside the market too, and you're helping spread this resistance further out into the community. Every time you teach a volunteer how to do this, they can use it anywhere. Okay, I see.
And it teaches your folks who come who's safe, because we often make assumptions about who has status or doesn't have status, and we're usually wrong. And the reality is just like any other situation, when we make ourselves a safe place consistently and we take those actions, people recognize and know that these are safe places, and that's where that trust builds. So people are watching and listening, and I think it's really great that you all are doing this work.
Let's see. Okay, there was okay, now I'm seeing everything. There was a question about whether a closed street is private property with regard to warrants. I do feel like we covered a lot of the public-private issue, but we could keep you on afterwards to answer that directly. And then Michael does have a lot of that information in the guide that he wrote that's in our resources. So with the time we have left, I might move on to something else. There's a question about SNAP and food benefits. Oh, I thought I heard somebody about to talk.
I was just going to comment, Michael, you put a comment in there about food and SNAP. I will say, because I work with the Oregon Food Bank on their leadership council as well, and I will say that we are already seeing in 6 counties, Benton, Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, Hood River, and Yamhill. Those counties already started with this new, with some exceptions, most folks are going to be limited to 3 months out of every 3 years to getting SNAP, which is an unbelievable thing that they've created in the federal the big bullshit bill. So, and not only that, but Oregon also has to fund like 500, approximately 500 million, 500 million. I have to look at the numbers, but a significant amount more than we've had to fund before. I say that to say we are going to start seeing in those 6 counties the SNAP benefits run out before the end of the year for folks who don't qualify for this other program. And then starting on the 1st of the year, it will be true for all counties. So we're going to see the SNAP piece become an issue very quickly just before the end of the year, and then it will spiral a bit more coming into next year. So just giving folks a heads up on that SNAP piece. I encourage you to read a little bit more about that if you have the opportunity, because there are going to be some pretty significant cuts coming, and it's going to affect a lot of our folks.
Heather, I see your question. Well, you're saying you're not sure if what the question exactly is, but I thought you were making some good points and of wanting some more support from this group about how you do, like you're not in Oregon, you're in Florida. If you want to come off mute and ask some more about what you were talking about and hear from others about how they about being vocal in a place that feels very red around you.
Sure. I mean, personally, I'm the opposite view, right? I'm a very progressive. I'm way on the end of progressive. But where I live, it's people are very hostile. It's not like not necessarily the market goers. The market goers, I feel like we get a lot of progressive type customers and we have those kind of vendors as well. But we also get, the non-progressive people. And so it's just we're super, super red bubble. If you guys have been paying attention to anything going on in Florida, it's not a very welcoming place to be. And like I was telling in the one-on-one groups, like if I could get out of Florida and have the perfect job that I have right now, I would leave. It's just not a safe place for most people. And so I think it's great that your markets can do that, but that's not something that we could do here. So, but I could definitely do like I do with any emergency or accident that happens, it's the witness, the note taking, the recording. I do all that anyways for anything that happens. But I didn't know if there was something else for anyone else, like if there's any other market that's kind of in my same situation or scenario. And if you're not, I'm happy for you. I wish I was there. Wish I was there, but I'm here and I'm trying to make the most of the situation. And like I said, we are known as the friendliest market around because we really do try to create that safe space. So that's where I'm at. But thank you all.
Yeah, Heather, I really encourage you to do some behind the scenes planning with those kids, because that's very real. And Florida's in this, like Florida, yeah, I'm sorry, that is a big thing to hold right now. So I just encourage you to have those conversations, if you can't do them more public facing, to really double down on those conversations with your folks and set up those roles ahead of time and make sure people have that training. Make sure they have those connections, which it sounds like you're already doing, especially being such a joyful place. And just help your folks set up ahead of time. So that way, when things do happen, you feel a little bit more prepared. Yeah. And I would say we welcome you here in Oregon, but also I'm so glad that Florida has people that have big hearts and that are intentionally doing this work right now. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I really am. Like, I have great relationships, like you guys were talking about earlier, with the police and the city officials and stuff. So that's something I am always very conscious of doing anyways. And the police don't always reflect what the city politics and the red bubble is either. And so there's a lot of good relationships there as well, but it is scary because it's going to happen. It's just an if, right? Or not an if, it's a when. It's when it's going to happen.
When,
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
win
especially
in this
in
climate.
places like Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
just
but
remember go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say this is really helpful. And I'm so glad that this is open to any of us, you know, outside of Oregon. So I'm really appreciative of this. And I thank you guys for the advice and tips and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here today. I would just detract and deter. I mean, distract, excuse me, and deter. When you're out there, just distract, 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 distract. You know, you got this.
Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left. Anybody sitting on a question that they've been wanting to get out?
It looks like Bill asked, what about preparing a brochure or for our information booth for our customers and vendors? The one thing I would encourage you to do is if you're creating things in writing to make sure that it stays within legal bounds, just because we have a lot of ideas and can have conversations, but when we're putting it in writing, um, but you know, putting the know your rights information, putting the clear and clara, like creating a brochure with like, hey, if you see this, this is what we'd like you to do. And sometimes you can even make it a little bit more general so that, you know, it's like if you see law enforcement, it doesn't have to even say ICE, or, you know, please direct them to so and so. And, you know, we don't allow law enforcement past a certain, you know, giving them that information in a more general way, which includes ICE, can sometimes be helpful as far as that's concerned. Michael might have some more thoughts on that as well.
I just thought, what if your community decided to say ICE by saying a different code word or name, and then the sign could say something else, but you all would know what it meant. I don't know what that word would be, but
Totally.
we could
Those are the creative ideas to work on, and just having that conversation with people about what is the code word we're going to use gets people talking about this and connecting with each other. Rose, your hand was up a second ago. Do you want to ask something?
Sure, yeah, thanks. It might be a longer conversation, so I don't know that this is the right spot, but just thinking about the aftercare a little bit more, like because once you confront something, like as a person who's going to be doing, like market managers, we're asking you to stand up and be that main person. So how do you care for yourself? What is your support network look behind you? That's part of that planning process you've been talking about. But also, like, if something like this happens in a market, it's likely that people will be nervous to come back to the market. So that we'll see vendors' sales drop. I think somebody else spoke to that in the breakout room I was at. So how can part of the planning process include engaging people after something has happened? Like once the ICE has left, how do we care for the community? And then how do we make sure that we're keeping people coming back to the market and knowing that it's safe moving forward so that vendors don't lose those sales and that we don't lose our community after something like that happens? It's just been on my mind.
It's a great question.
I would hope that market managers, especially our Oregon ones, would feel like OFMA is part of your community. Please come to us, tell us what happened. We will care for you. Please come to the peer learning circle and tell your market manager community what happened, and let us be there with you. Those happen every Tuesday, or monthly on the first Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing you might consider, and it depends on your space and your market, right? Because everybody's different in a different space, but maybe be creative in your next market or two and being like, you know, we're going to have it could be anything from like a small song circle to like sharing some kind of food to like, guess what? We're having a barbecue at the market this next week, because it draws people in and allows people to have conversation about something very real that affected a lot of people, even if they weren't present at that moment in our community, but especially those that are present. So that might not wrap up the market manager directly in that moment, but I think that really is like leaning into our family, friends, and community and each other, but bring people in a genuine way afterwards. That's like, hey, we all know this was really hard. We're all here together. Let's be in this together. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's like a free flower Saturday and you give away a flower to each person that comes in, or you have a barbecue, or you encourage donations. Hey, a family was affected and they need some clothes or some funds. And so we're going to have a barbecue and raise funds to help that family. Serving others is one thing that actually really supports us in our nervous systems and our community building.
Thank you, everybody. I hope just being here this hour and a half has been good for your nervous systems.
Mhm.
It's what I've been liking to ask people lately is how are you? How is your nervous system? And I know that for me today, just being part of this group and seeing all of you here, making it easier for me to answer that question today. So thanks. I hope to see you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Michael, for sharing all your wisdom and expertise and examples. We look forward to staying in touch with you. And we hope people will come to our next workshops coming up in the future this fall.